Menlo students, welcome to our final week of our plot twist series. For those of you who I haven't met before, my name is Allison Lee. I'm kind of new here at Menlo. I've spent the last 6 months serving as the worship leader at the Saratoga campus and hanging out with the students there. Shout out to my Saratoga students. And now I'm transitioning into the worship leader position at Menlo Park. So shout out to Menlo Park. I'll be meeting all you guys soon. I'm super glad to be here with you today sharing this time as we jump into the last week of plot twists. We've been talking about how plot twists are kind of a natural part. They're part of our reality as humans. And sometimes they're good and they surprise us, and sometimes they're bad and things don't turn out as we hoped for. But we have a hope because God has the copyright for the best plot twist of all time. It's the story of the Bible, the story of his death and his resurrection. And as we wrap up this series today, I want to talk about the times we derail our own stories. And there's plot twists with accidents, mistakes, times that we mess up, times that we fail. And mess ups can come in all sort of shapes and sizes. So we're going to do something together. We're going to feel some secondhand embarrassment together. I'm going to read you some scenarios. And on a scale of 1 to 5, show me on your hand like how embarrassing that would be. 1 being like you could live with it if the public knew that this happened. 5 being like, oh my gosh, I would just crawl into a hole. I can't believe people know this. So the first one, here's the scenario. You finally get the courage to text your crush and they leave you on red. Scale of 1 to 5. How humiliated would you be? Would you just be like, 3, like this is pretty bad, but I can move on? Or like 5, this is the worst. The next one. You show up to school and you realize you're wearing the same outfit as your best friend. On a scale of 1 to 5, are you guys like cool with that? Or is there like weird competition tension, 1 to 5, how bad? Another one. You try to text your friend about another friend who's annoying you, but you accidentally text that friend instead. Scale of 1 to 5. How uncomfortable are you with that scenario? And then the last one. You wait outside a store, waiting forever for the automatic door to open, and then someone walks past you and they just open it and you find out it's not automatic at all. How embarrassing. Scale 1 to 5. Oh gosh, we just felt some secondhand embarrassment together. Just to make you feel a little better, I'll share a personal story of a time that I really messed up. Maybe you'll feel some secondhand embarrassment with this one too. But this is one of those moments. I know we all have them, that when you're like tossing and turning at night, you can't sleep, it's 3 a.m., you got a big test tomorrow or something. These moments pop into your head and you're like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I did that. I can't sleep. Now I'm really not going to be able to sleep. So this is a true story. This happened. I was in high school. I was hanging out with my friends. And a couple weeks ago, I had broken up with my boyfriend. And in a not very kind way, we were hanging out and talking about this ex-boyfriend of mine. And I very wrongly had our text messages pulled up. And I was kind of reading to them what he was saying to me and how he wanted me back and all these things. And let's just say our conversation was not the kindest. And at some point, I looked down at my phone and I realized I definitely recorded like a minute's worth of our conversation in a voice memo recording. That was a new feature at the time, and it just sent right off. And I couldn't unsend it. What's done was done. There was a minute of girl gossip that just got blasted onto his phone. And I remember feeling just like the worst embarrassment and guilt, like down to my toes. Like I'd already kind of broken this guy's heart. And now I'm just going to blast him with this conversation of a bunch of other girls, which I really shouldn't have been having in the first place, reading our messages to those people. When we mess up, sometimes it's so hard to handle those feelings like, oh, I should not have done that. So right now, before we jump more into what this looks like, I want you to have a conversation with people next to you, maybe gather with 2 or 3 people. Talk about a time you've messed up or a most embarrassing story. It can be as serious or as funny as you want it to be. And then here's another question for you. When you mess up, what do you think the difference is between feeling embarrassed and feeling guilty? Go ahead and jump into conversation together.
We have 30 more seconds. Start wrapping up your conversations.
All right, now that you've shared your deepest, darkest moments with each other, we're going to talk about a time in the Bible when someone really messed up. His name was Peter. Peter was a follower and a friend of Jesus. He was a ringleader of the disciples. When we look at the Bible, we see that when Jesus asked a question or proposed an idea, Peter was often the first to raise his hand and blurt out the answer. He was a star pupil. He was passionate. He was probably a little annoying sometimes, like teacher's pet vibes, but he loved Jesus and he followed him wholeheartedly. He was the one, if you remember the story from the Bible of a disciple jumping out of the boat and walking on water, that was Peter. He loved Jesus in a fearless way. Following Jesus was a huge part of his identity, one of his greatest passions. But Peter messed up. Peter betrayed Jesus. And while this sounds like a huge plot twist to us, Jesus knew. He told Peter to his face, he told him, "You will reject me. You will deny even knowing me, not once, but 3 times." And of course, Peter, in all his passion and zeal for Jesus, said, "Oh, no, Jesus, there's no way. I would die before denying you." But once Jesus was arrested and Peter saw the way that the guards treated Jesus and the way that the crowds were spitting at him and hating towards him, fear took over. And as he gathered around a charcoal fire near where Jesus was taken by the guards, some townspeople started to recognize his face. And they asked him, "Hey, aren't you one of those people that followed Jesus?" All of a sudden, the fearless, passionate Peter was full of fear. He doesn't want to be taken away to be crucified with Jesus. We all like to think in a moment like this, that we'd step up, that we'd be a hero, that we'd stand up for what we believe in. But Peter did maybe what a lot of us would have done. He was afraid, and that fear took over. So without hesitation, Peter defends himself and says, I don't know this man. A second time, a villager asks him, you look like one of the guys that was with Jesus. And Peter's fear and panic grows. And he says, no, that's not me. A third time, someone accuses him of following Jesus. I picture Peter's voice raising even louder. And right as he yells the words, I do not know him. I do not know what you're talking about. He looks in the distance and he locks eyes with Jesus. Jesus was right there. He heard and watched the whole thing. It unfolded just as he had predicted. Of all the betrayals that Jesus experienced leading up to his death, this one may have hurt him the most. Peter was one of his closest friends and disciples, and he turned his back on Jesus and denied even knowing him. Not once, not twice, but 3 times. But imagine Peter, the one who found his very identity in being a star student for Jesus, following him with passion and zeal, now finding himself under the weight of this massive failure. Imagine the guilt he carried, knowing the last words Jesus heard him say before his death was his repetitive denial, I do not know this man, I do not know Jesus. Imagine how much sleep Peter lost, knowing that he'd betrayed the one he loved the most, replaying it in his head over and over, desperately wishing that he could go back and undo what he did. But there's a plot twist. Those would not be Peter's last words with Jesus, because Jesus raises from the dead. Let's read together what happens when Jesus talks to Peter for the first time after his resurrection. Let me set the scene. The disciples are out fishing. They have heard and seen that Jesus has been resurrected from the dead, and they see a man standing on the shore, and they recognize it's Jesus. And here's where we enter the next part of the story. John 21, verses 7 through 17. That disciple who Jesus loved therefore said to Peter, it is the Lord. When Simon Peter heard that it was the Lord, he threw himself out into the sea, and the other disciples came in the boat, dragging the net full of fish, for they were not far off from the land, but about 100 yards off. When they got out on the land, they saw a charcoal fire, with fish laid out on it and bread. Jesus said to them, bring some of the fish that you have caught. So Simon Peter went aboard and hauled the net ashore, full of large fish. And although there were so many that the net was not torn, Jesus said to them, come and have breakfast. Now none of the disciples dared ask him, who are you? They knew it was the Lord. Jesus came, took the bread and gave it to them, and so with the fish. This was now the 3rd time that Jesus was revealed to the disciples after he was raised from the dead. When they had finished eating, Jesus said to Simon Peter, Simon Peter, son of John, do you love me more than these? Yes, Lord, he said. You know that I love you. Jesus said, feed my lambs. Again, Jesus said, Simon Peter, son of John, do you love me? He answered, yes, Lord, you know that I love you. Jesus said, take care of my sheep. The 3rd time he said to him, Simon Peter, son of John, do you love me? Peter was hurt because Jesus asked him the 3rd time, do you love me? And he said, Lord, you know all things. You know that I love you. And Jesus said, feed my sheep. Is that what you would have said if you were Jesus? If it was me, that I know those would not have been the words coming out of my mouth. This is the part where I would have popped off and been like, I told you this is what you would do, and you still did it. What kind of friend are you? I thought you loved me. I thought I could count on you. But you abandoned me in my greatest hour of need. I don't need you anymore. I don't need you in my life anymore. But that is not what Jesus does. Jesus has compassion for Peter. And I know none of us have ever been in this exact same position as Peter, but we know what it feels like. Every one of us has messed up. We have all disappointed a parent, a coach, a teacher that we dearly love and look up to. We have all talked bad about a friend that we love and they've overheard. We've all lost sleep over the moments that we just can't take back. We have felt the same guilt and shame that Peter felt. But Jesus doesn't react like we would. Instead, Jesus gives Peter a second chance. In an incredibly strategic and unique way, this moment was meant for Peter. Jesus gives Peter, his star student, a chance to answer a new question. Jesus gathers around a charcoal fire with Peter, much like the very fire he stood at when he denied Jesus. And he gives Peter the chance to redeem the very words he can't even forgive himself for, to trade his failure for a calling, to give him a new scene to replay over and over in his head. For each time that Peter denied Jesus, Jesus gives him the chance to replace the words with, "Yes, Jesus, I love you." Jesus forgave Peter. Jesus picked up right where they had left off. And then Jesus invites Peter to have even more of a role in Jesus' mission than he'd had before. Just like Jesus knew Peter would deny him, Jesus knew Peter would play a crucial role in building the church and spreading the good news of Jesus. When Peter failed Jesus, he may have worried he'd never be able to get right with Jesus again. Maybe you felt that way before. But with Jesus, there's always one more plot twist in the works, and it's always a good one. Like Peter, when we mess up, Jesus gives us another chance.
Hi, Menlo students. We're from the student leadership team. I'm Sophia.
And I'm Megan.
And we're going to discuss the talk today. So, I think what resonated with me the most was just the unconditional forgiveness that Jesus truly gave Peter. Because even though Jesus was on the cross for Peter and his sins, he still chose to betray Jesus. And I think knowing that, Jesus still gave him a second chance and opened up to him in like open arms and offered a place of forgiveness and to relieve him of this shame. And I think that was just like so cool and like so reassuring here.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. And that kind of reminds me of a time I was mad at God, which was like my 8th grade year. I first moved here. I didn't know anyone, and I was so mad at God because I was starting over again. And so my way of rebelling was by not going to Menlo students in middle school. But I ended up thinking to go HSM when high school came around, which is high school ministries at Menlo Park campus. But I ended up going, and I made a commitment to myself to say, like, I'm going to go every single week. And through that, I guess I kind of forgave God because I was able to build a community and a life group, and I met you. And it was just such a great time for me because now I'm here, and it's just, yeah.
Yeah, that's so cool, Megan. And actually thinking about that, a quote from that popped up in my Bible app that connects to that is actually from Peter, and it says, "And the God of all grace, who called you to his eternal glory in Christ, after you have suffered a little while, will himself restore you and make you strong, firm, and steadfast." And I think this quote is just so powerful because it has really shown up in my life. And I think like with the college process and my friend drama, it has brought like a lot of pain and stuff in my life. But with that, I have been able to grow in God in a way that I've never been able to grow in before. And actually, shout out YWAM. After that trip, it really opened my eyes to a relationship with God in kind of like a new light.
Mhm.
And because of the pain I had suffered and endured, like now I have this relationship with God that's the strongest that has ever been in my entire life. And I think it's just so cool that like when we're going through these moments of pain where we might feel mad at God, like he's going to use those and he has a purpose for it. And yeah, it was just so cool how like it truly showed up in my life.
I think that's a really cool story, especially since you mentioned YWAM. But I really like that because it really shows like how God is always there through everything, and He's always gonna be there. Well, we are so glad you were able to join us through this series along our conversations. But we will see you maybe at the
Worship night.
Yeah. Okay. Well,
Bye
bye,
guys.